one of the things and why I was happy that Brad was going to join us today is that when we look at a lot of this funding, and even if we look at just initiatives across the world, right? I mean, the broadband is not, I think was said earlier about, it's a societal thing. So obviously we're talking about North America, but it truly is a global thing and a global initiative. And Brian and I were joking ahead of the call, like, just because we get more money, bigger is not always better sometimes for the US.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just don't always get it right. But I'm curious, what can we learn from each other, both from, between Canada and the US, between us, North America, Europe, South America? What are the things that we can learn and be thankful for that other people have done ahead of us, that now when we have this truly once in a lifetime opportunity of investment, what can we learn, or what have we learned?
I think for me, it's just being able to work with a lot of other leaders, like that are on this call today, and sharing openly, how we're solving it. I mean, there's competition, but there's so much to be done. Just being able to have this open dialogue, between organizations, and how really it's the smaller guys, if you will, are figuring this out. Because one of the impressive stats, Nick, is the not only the growth of obviously homes passed with fiber in the States, but the amount that's actually being covered by small providers. Small providers are making up the largest amount, than of those homes passed than we've ever seen before. And it's exactly what Brad said. I mean, it's still dominated by the big companies, but we're showing that the small carriers are driving inroads across, I mean, every single state, right? Every province, right? It's competition that's making this happen, and it's a lot of this tribal knowledge and this willingness to share, for sure, amongst all of the small competitive carriers, that's really helping to drive a lot of this. And because at the end of the day, we need a larger force that's out there pushing the incumbents. Still today across the US, I mean, a handful of companies make up almost 80% of the homes passed, right? So we're still dominated, but when we look at now as a fiber technology, we're seeing the largest percentage of small carriers ever being associated with the total amount that they serve. So I think it is being able to share information openly, share how we're doing it. Kerm and I just had a great call the other day,
Yeah.
sharing, information very openly with each other on what we'd like to see, how are you doing it, how are you doing this, how are we doing
That's
that, and just figuring it out together, and sharing
Right.
that information. Because if it can just help, one person or one other organization do something a little quicker, a little faster, that's going to the greater good. Because the greater good is about getting more people connected, right, across North America. Because at the end of the day, you cannot have economic growth in any community without broadband, right? And the more that community is covered holistically, the better that community is going to be better off, right? So we've got to continue to drive that forward. And the incumbents wouldn't be making this happen if it weren't for the smaller competitive carriers, right? And obviously now pandemics and other things making everyone realize how much of a need this is. We've been saying the same thing for a long, long time. Now, luckily, everyone is starting to understand the importance, not just across North America, worldwide, right?
Right. 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 Yeah, I'm glad, Brian, you said that, because we were talking about a lot of stuff. And one of the things we end up talking about is what is the customer service, customer experience, best practices that we have that we ended up sharing. And I think that's at the root of it, because by and large, over the last 30, 40 years, consumer expectations from telecommunications in the United States, the bar has cratered, has really cratered, right? So for us, it's an opportunity to say, well, this is what you should expect. And for the people who can rise up to that occasion, you should give them your business. And if you're in a position where you cannot, actually, you can demand that from the incumbent that you unfortunately are in the behest of. So I think empowering the consumer is indicative of the 21st century. I truly, truly believe that. Where the 19th and the 20th century industrialized way of doing business, I think the consumer is not going to accept that anymore. And then, for us, for example, you look at our, I have friends in Europe, right? So Europe, believes in infrastructure. They believe in the long-term play. And there are countries out there that laid fiber 10 years ago, and they were always giving me a whole bunch of rash of poo, saying you guys build more football stadiums than you do actually infrastructure that actually matters to your citizens, right? And that's a true statement. Now I'm saying that equation is changing. It is changing, and one tangible sort of capture of that is, so for example, in Maine, we have now some number of Afghan refugees coming in from the crisis, right? And this became really real. So as an immigrant, I feel that I have some radar up that, for all immigrant rights and advocacy. But here's something really real. Refugees come in, they get put in housing. Even in cities, there are places where the broadband connectivity to the housing is simply inefficient on a good day, crap on a really bad day, right? So the way I heard about it is because they were saying, Karam, these immigrants are here and they cannot talk to their families. And it took me a millisecond to realize the reason they can't do that is because the only way they can get connectivity is if there's internet, if there's Wi-Fi, and they can get on WhatsApp. Because WhatsApp is their connection to their families back in Afghanistan. So they can just say, I'm here, I'm alive, I'm okay. The fact that they couldn't do that is an existential angst, right? So, but these are the things that become very viscerally clear to us is, okay, the availability of connectivity infrastructure allows people that we have invited over to be part and parcel of our society, our knit society, and say, okay, you will now be included. I think that's really important. The idea of you will now be part and parcel of society. And I think there's plenty to look at the way the Europeans have done it, the way, frankly, even the Canadians have done that. The sense of inclusion, I think, is really important. Because the telecommunications industry in the last 30 years, let's be perfectly honest, they've redlined the hell out of the United States. And now we're sort of redressing that with $65 billion, right? You've got 150 million Americans in rural parts that are just not part and parcel. They're living below 25/3, for God's sake. I mean, that's just criminal, right? So we're redressing the wrong of the past, which I think is great. So a lot of pressure, but great.
Well said.
Any other lessons we can learn from our neighbors on the borders or outside the borders?
Yeah, I think that the capital efficiency of these programs, is important. And I don't know to what extent this is happening in the United States, but I saw it in Europe. And Karen mentioned, some of the things Europe was doing 10 years ago. Fiber to the prem was blowing out everywhere. In fact, I was doing some consulting in Portugal just before I ended up joining Nick and on the sunny shores of the Mid-Pacific. But what I saw there was incredible, right? It was Portugal Telecom was rolling out fiber. Cablevisio, the main cable provider, was overbuilding fiber to the prem. You had two separate, and there were third parties coming in certain regions with a third fiber. Now, you can imagine but this stuff's coming in on an aerial basis. It wasn't pretty. The stuff that was being trenched, you had junction boxes like in the middle of sidewalks, and there was a bit of the Wild West. But I think the point was, this was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, providers were fighting over each other to get that second and that third fiber. Now, I can't speak to how the economics played out. And I think in countries like United States and certainly in Canada, our density is not going to support that. So I think what it calls for is, and I say this as a CLEC, I think it calls for fair access from a regulatory perspective, and tariffed wholesale rates that are going to ensure capital is spent effectively, efficiently, getting as many people connected to true broadband, to fiber, because let's be honest, nothing but fiber really matters now, and getting them connected as fast as possible, but making sure there's still choice, making sure that there's still competition, that there's still affordability. And I think that takes good regulation. And I can't speak for where the FCC is on this, But I'll go on record and just say the CRTC, they took a wrong turn at the last exit at the interstate, and they are way out in the farmer's field, and they are missing the opportunity to do what's right for Canadians. This is a paid service announcement, but no, it is the reality. Is they have caved to the pressure of the incumbents and backed away from regulatory policy that supports competition, that supports choice, and ultimately drives affordability. And I can tell you, Canadians pay more for every gigabit of speed. They pay more for their mobile service plans than just about any other country in the world, any other developed nation in the world. And it is because the incumbents control the market in an oligopoly that isn't serving anybody as well as it could. And so I see what happened in Portugal, and then I see these broadband funds accelerating the rollout and the deployment. What we need to do is we need to ensure that we complete the circle here, and that we have good regulatory policy, so that broadband infrastructure that gets built obviously rewards those that take some risk, but also supports competition, affordability, and choice in the marketplace.
I think we don't even have is the FCC, I know the current FCC chairwoman, I guess, is not even confirmed yet, right? Like, it's still interim.
She's been nominated.
She's been
I think she's been
nominated,
nominated, but not confirmed. Yeah.
We might like to unconfirm the appointed chair of our regulatory body. I think his term comes to an end. He's a former incumbent executive, so
okay.
you can see a bias there. But his term ends at some point next year, so we might wait him out yet.
Wow. Is it a 3-person or a 5-person commission, Brad? How's that work
It's more. I want to say like 7 or 8.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think there's like one for each province, quite possibly 10.
Oh, interesting.